guest, Tieshun. Is that your name? Am I pronouncing this right?
Yeah, Tieshun.
Tieshan. Okay.
Yeah, good.
So Tieshan is CEO of Namebase, which is the platform that make it easy to participate, to buy, trade, and sell names on Handshake protocol. And Namebase is centralized company, which I believe many people often mix these two. I saw the interview when people ask you, or rather accuse you of being CEO of Handshake, which is not the case. The Handshake doesn't have CEO. But before we go into these things, before we talk about Namebase, Handshake, um, which is interesting, and I want to ask some things because I think concept of DeFi is easy for people. Concept of token like Bitcoin is easy for people, but I realize that concept of naming protocol is so confusing for people. So this is why it's worth to talk. Um, but before we start, your Twitter says you're a high school dropout and MIT dropout. How can you be high school dropout and MIT dropout? Don't you have to have high school to?
Yeah, so fortunately, you don't need to graduate high school to go to MIT,
Oh,
which was
right.
kind of lucky for me. I dropped out of high school to work in Silicon Valley as a software engineer. So I did that, and then I started a company that went through Y Combinator, which is a startup accelerator. They funded, Stripe and Dropbox and Airbnb. But I did that for 2 years, and then afterwards, I was able to go and I applied to MIT. Fortunately, they let me in. It was the only school that accepted me, and studied there for 2 years before leaving to start Namebase.
Yeah, like so I was really surprised because I know of MIT. Not sure if you ever heard the book I Think the Game, or maybe different, but it was about MIT students who were playing blackjack. So
Oh, interesting.
I was teenager, I'm from Poland, so I wasn't very familiar with the universities in US, and that's how I learned about MIT, which is known for having clever people that do cool stuff. What were you doing there? What were you studying in MIT?
I studied math and computer science.
All right. And I also see the other thing that you were at Thiel Fellowship. So Peter Thiel is, let's say, it famous venture capitalist. Am I saying this right? And he's known as the first person who invented the Facebook. So can you tell me how did you get there and what you were doing there?
Yeah, the Thiel Fellowship is fairly lightweight. Basically, Peter Thiel personally funds about like 20 students each year to drop out of school and work on their own companies. He funded Vitalik, the founder of Ethereum, funded Dylan, who is the founder of Figma, which is I think like a multi-billion-dollar company now. So he's funded a lot of great people, and pretty basic process there. I just applied, went through the interviews, and then they kind of granted me the funding to go and leave MIT and start working on Namebase. So that's been very fortunate.
Yeah, I was wondering, did he funded you to drop from high school or MIT? But you said MIT. So Peter Thiel, you saying, is aware of the name base,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
basically, because um yeah, that's that's interesting background you have. Like you're for sure the right person on the right place. So let's go to uh actually, because I'm not sure if I'm right. Was Handshake created in MIT? Because when I tried to search about the Handshake, I saw there was one. I'm not sure if it was MIT student, but he was explaining the concept of the Handshake protocol before it went live. So this is how I'm trying to connect the dots. Where is the
Mm.
origin of Handshake? Was it in
Yeah. So
MIT?
you probably saw there is a MIT Technology Review article about Handshake.
Hmm.
Um, But no, Handshake was not created within MIT. It was actually created by there were kind of like three founding creators. One was Joseph Poon, who was one of the co-creators of the Lightning Network. You have Andrew Lee, who founded Purse, and then another Andrew Lee who was involved in private internet access, which is a privacy-focused VPN. So these guys, they were all very, very early, like Bitcoin OGs, I would say, and they kind of had this vision for decentralized DNS, and they realized that any sort of decentralized DNS would need to be very censorship resistant, very decentralized in order for it to actually, gain adoption and be resilient to the types of attacks that DNS is currently vulnerable to. So they were the ones that actually created the protocol. There's a developer, Christopher Jeffrey, as well, who was very involved. And then from there, they basically set back to let the community form around Handshake. And then for us, we basically came across the Handshake white paper. We read it, and then both Anthony, my co-founder, who was also at MIT, he graduated a year early, studying computer science and cybersecurity. But both him and myself, we both have backgrounds in engineering, and we read the white paper and we really fell in love with Handshake as a protocol. It's a very elegant solution to decentralized naming. So that's why we've been building on it ever since.
Yeah, may I know when was it when you discovered it? When you saw white paper?
Yeah, I think it was near the end of 2018, the summer near the end of 2018.
So it's nearly 2 years before it went live, I believe. Yeah, am I correct? Yeah. So do you know how long it was in development, or it started 2018 and it was
No, it
since
was
then?
actually, yeah, it was in development because we met a few of the we've met basically everyone kind of involved in the early
And,
development.
yeah, and also if you can say, I wonder how many people was involved, because actually it's so difficult to get this information, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah,
So
yeah, definitely. I think it's about, there were a bunch of people involved lightly, but in terms of like the core work involved, I would say it was probably around like 4 or 5 people, maybe six. There was Joseph Poon, Andrew Lee, and then there's another Andrew that I mentioned. Those three. Christopher Jeffrey, who was a big developer. This guy Boima, who was very involved. Jing, who is actually the founder of Optimism, the Ethereum scaling solution. So she was actually involved as well. And then Mark Tyneway and Matt Zipkin, these were all a few of the people involved. I would say that kind of comprises everyone that contributed significantly to it. But again, like the core drivers were the first four people that I mentioned, Joseph, Andrew, and Christopher Jeffrey.
yeah, I'd like to learn more about them, but actually maybe you should introduce actually the Handshake. So you read the white paper, and yeah, so far we have the Bitcoin, which is basically the token, proof of work token that can be mined. We have Ethereum, which is smart contract platform, and then we have Handshake. What is the Handshake? Because like, if you can tell me like in 1 or 2 minutes, what is the Handshake?
Yeah, definitely. So Handshake is basically a proof of work based decentralized naming system, and it's specifically a decentralized naming system for DNS. Domain names like google.com, facebook.com, these are all domain names within the domain name system, or DNS for short. And the specific aspect that Handshake solves is when you look at a domain name like .com, .ao, .net, these are all top level domain names within the existing DNS system. And what Handshake does is it allows you to actually register decentralized top level domain names. So you can register .markin or .micus and use that as a root name for your decentralized website. And there are a number of reasons why you want to actually decentralize the root names and not just the second level domain. And I can get into that later. But basically, in a nutshell, what you're getting on Handshake is you have a decentralized naming system, and the names are used as top level domain names.
So I want to actually get straight to one comment that someone left to me yesterday, because I quite often talk about about the handshake and about the name base. And when I would say about DeFi, everyone understand that. But I spoke about the handshake, and I say it solved the um, problem of centralized top level domains.
Hmm.
So this is what I got in response, and I actually want you to to say what do you think and how would you respond to this.
Hmm.
Um, Someone said, "I don't see the value of the centralized top level name. What is the case of it, and what is it trying to solve? It adds more complexity to an issue rather than solve it." So we already have com. So why we would complicate the things and make different names, many different names? It doesn't seem easier, because I believe that more people will be concerned about the comfort. So it's easy. I can go to Hoover or I can go to GoDaddy and
Hmm.
get my domain. Why would I complicate my life? Can you tell me?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. That's a great question. I would say that's kind of analogous saying, we already have dollars and yen. What's the point of creating Bitcoin? It just complicates it. Um, the root problem that Handshake solves is, well, there's a number of aspects to it, but it's really around the governance of this global naming system that the entire internet relies on, and also the centralization and censorship of that naming system. So if you think about a decentralized application, like let's look at Uniswap, for example. Uniswap's backend is decentralized, right? The actual logic is on a smart contract. So that aspect is decentralized. But the Uniswap frontend is hosted on the domain uniswap.exchange. That domain is a point of centralization within this decentralized application. And it has an issue with, if Uniswap gets hacked, people can lose their funds. It allows for governments and regulating authorities to put pressure on the Uniswap team, which is based in the US, to go and censor their front end and change it. And while technically the application is still accessible through the backend, right, through the smart contract, in practice, this poses an issue because a lot of volume goes through the standard Uniswap front end. So whatever defaults they set or are forced to set, that actually has an influence on the actual behavior of the entire ecosystem. So a core issue with decentralized applications today is that they have centralized front ends hosted on centralized domain names. And that is a point of weakness in the entire ecosystem. So what Handshake does is it actually allows you to have, decentralized domain names. And the interesting thing about DNS is that it's this is fairly technical, but it works in a tree structure. Basically, you have ICANN, which is the governing authority at the top. And then below that, they manage who gets what TLD. So VeriSign owns .com, a different government owns .ai, Indian Ocean owns .io. So you have different authorities that control each TLD, and then they go and manage the TLD. And so VeriSign is issuing the .com domains, and Indian Ocean is issuing the .io domains, and they each control it. So, oh,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
So basically, when someone says, "I believe in decentralized finance, I believe in DeFi, and I believe in the centralized application, but I don't believe in the centralized namings," is in opposition, because what you say, you cannot have decentralized finance. We have the centralized domain name, because despite the fact that someone use Uniswap, it doesn't mean it's all decentralized, because they go to centralized website. So they're still at risk. They are still at risk of authorities and things like that. Am I
Yep,
understand?
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Yep, that's
I'm
correct.
trying to convert this into some like simple terms. So um I think like Handshake was fairly successful, right, at the getting the funding. And as you said, there was around 5 people working on that, and it seems they left. It seems they don't work on the Handshake. So could you tell me how did it work? Did they receive the money and they were like, "Yep, our job is done"?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a
That's
great
how it worked.
question. So they actually gave away all the money. What was really interesting is the early vision for Handshake was always that it kind of needed to go the Bitcoin route, where it was created by a small set of individuals, but from then a community took over it and made it a very decentralized and robust community. So what they did, and this was always the plan from the start, was basically in a centralized foundation, create the protocol and then launch it. And then after the protocol went live, they dissolved the foundation so that there wouldn't be any central actor that's kind of in a leadership position. And when it comes to the funding, they actually didn't use any of there's $10 million raised for the Handshake Foundation, and none of that was actually used to actually launch the protocol. All of it was given away to various internet nonprofits such as the EFF, GNU, um, Apache, a bunch of various organizations. So the purpose of the fundraiser was actually only to give the Handshake tokens a initial price and to kind of spread goodwill with other internet organizations. And that's why the fundraise even happened in the first place. And then past that, it was just given away and the organization was dissolved.
You're the first person being able to explain that to me, because I was trying to ask people like, okay, they raise the money, who they give away? Because I'm seeing right now, for example, Handshake is still struggling for the funding because Handshake doesn't have funding, and there's like some Handshake organizations, but they don't have money. So I was
Mhm.
wondering, like, hey, there was 10 million raised. Where did it go? But you told me that they actually gave it away to different organizations who could potentially participate in the Handshake protocol, right? And it's quite unusual maybe now because Handshake using proof of work similar to Bitcoin. Why not proof of stake? Can the naming protocol could use proof of stake or not really? It cannot.
Yeah, so when you look into that, the reason why Handshake was on proof of work, and actually the first version of Handshake, this is just like a little history that's like not super well known, but the initial version of Handshake was written on a proof of stake. But this was back in 2018, and at the time, proof of stake was still unproven. And I would say even now, right, there are some open questions about it, and people there's in theory it should work and people are bullish about it, but it's still needs to be tested in production for a while. But what the purpose of proof of work was they needed to create a decentralized naming protocol that would be resilient to bad actors and censorship, and that they would have confidence in, would be running for 10 plus years or ideally forever, and would be something that people could have trust in. At the time, proof of work was the only thing that really had that longevity, right? Bitcoin is the oldest blockchain, so it's had the most attacks, the most stress tests, and there was a certain level of certainty in proof of work. That doesn't mean that it's impossible to create a naming system on proof of stake, and it might be even desirable depending on the implementation. But basically, at the time, proof of work was the most reliable protocol to build on, and so that was what was used.
Someone asked, like, how about Hashgraph? I don't know anything about Hashgraph, but maybe this is the question to you if you know anything about this. I think in opposition to what you just said.
Yeah, I actually don't know much about Hashgraph, so I'm not the person to ask that either.
Yeah, that's so like wrong people to ask.
I will say that there were specific, there's also a question that commonly gets asked is, oh, what about Ethereum? Why not on the Ethereum build naming system on that? And there was actually a pretty specific reason for why. One important piece of software that needed to exist for this decentralized naming system is a lightweight DNS resolver, a light client that could trustlessly resolve the names with very little resources. Because if you think about a decentralized naming system, you want people to be able to access it from anywhere, from any device. You want people to be able to have a mobile app that they can resolve the records through, and you want that to be going through a truly decentralized service rather than going through a server that someone else set up and is indexing the records for you and resolving the names, because that's the same as using the centralized DNS. So you're not really getting much of a benefit. So you really need this decentralized this very, very light client that can resolve the names trustlessly. Otherwise, the resiliency of the entire system of people accessing the names is fairly weak. And in order to do that, there is some pretty specific technical mathematical proofs that you need to do. And that wasn't actually possible to build that sort of client on Ethereum. But using Handshake, it was actually possible. So they actually architected the entire protocol in order to enable this fast, lightweight resolution. And that's one of the reasons why Handshake was built on its own blockchain instead of on other chains or on Ethereum.
I want to do little step back. It's really cool things to learn, but what is the unproven things about proof of stake? Because proof of work, especially last 6 months, I think gets such a horrible press, and everyone is so speaking in only superlative words about proof of stake. So what is the simple what's unproven about proof of stake?
Yeah, I would say the primary aspect, and this is I'm not deep within protocol knowledge of proof of stake versus proof of work. One was at the time, again, this was in 2018, so now we're 3 years later, and
I believe the first one. So sorry for stopping you. When Handshake was getting work on, there was probably on the Cosmos. Am I correct? Probably doing it.
I think it was Cosmos.
Yeah.
I think it was Cosmos. This is, my memory is a little bit weak here, but I think it was.
Yeah.
And again, this was in 2018, and I would say the main thing to be proven is really have you heard of when something is Lindy? It's this idea that if something has lasted for a certain amount of time, a ballpark estimate for how much longer it'll last is how long it's already been in existence. So for example, the Bible is very Lindy because it's been around for a very, very long time. But Coca-Cola is also pretty Lindy, but it's less Lindy than the Bible because it's only been around for 100 years. A new startup that just starts and is 1 month old is very not Lindy because it's only 1 month old. So you can kind of expect that it'll only last another month as a ballpark estimate. So when you think about it through that lens, proof of work is fairly Lindy, right? It's been running for 10 years successfully. Proof of stake is less Lindy. It's not been running in production with large scale for as long. Gold is much more Lindy, right? It's been around for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. I'm not as familiar with how long it's been around, but I'm pretty sure it's been around for a long time. So that's really the lens in which you want to evaluate this, because you want to have a naming system that ideally the entire world can rely on and is very resilient and robust. And so that's really the main context for why Handshake chose proof of work. Now we're seeing there are other, maybe other alternatives that might be even better than proof of work. And that's definitely something to explore.
So considering what you just said, many people would say, hey, Bitcoin is better gold. But considering being Lindy would be nonsense. Nonsense.
Yeah,
so does it mean you are very bullish on gold? Because
I would say I'm bullish on gold lasting for a long time. Definitely bullish on that. Price wise, I'm definitely more bullish on Bitcoin over gold, right? Gold is just the Lindy is really how long it lasts, not how much the asset will appreciate. When you see the interviews of large hedge fund managers or large money managers that manage hundreds of billions of dollars in their portfolio value, this is kind of how they talk about it. When they talk about Bitcoin, they're like, oh, it's still unproven. It's only 10 years old. In our world, 10 years is a crazy long time, right? If something that lasts 10 years, it's like, okay, this is going to be around for a while. especially in crypto. But when you think about when you think about these like money managers and like them putting their money and billions of dollars into something, this is how they think about it. They're like, okay, gold's been around forever, super stable, super liquid, not going to go away. Bitcoin, only 10 years. Can it go poof? Like maybe it's only been around for 10 years. So they don't really know. That's how they evaluate that.
And probably the risk management, right? As you said, like 10 years is nothing, and especially for institutions that manage large amounts of money, not their own money. They
Mm-hmm.
not this, like me and you, we can go into blockchain, like,
Mm-hmm.
because I guess we lose it. Okay, we still not that old.
Mm-hmm.
But it's different matter. Um, Getting back to Handshake, so there is already some. It seems there is some projects, some naming protocols.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I got one more thought. I actually think many centralized, like, sorry, I will just tell you because I keep having from some domain pages, I keep having offers on new top level domains. Did you notice this recently? Like, sudden they keep offering me new top level domains. Today I got offer on that website, and before was like that music or something like this. Did you notice this sort of trend that there is more top level with different names? Did you notice this?
So there aren't actually more top level domains today than there were a year ago. The way it works is that ICANN, the organization that governs the namespace, and we can all go into a whole spiel about ICANN. There are a lot of problems with it. There's corruption and cronyism and all that. And there's a bunch of controversy around that organization. But basically, they determine who gets new TLDs and when. And there was a period in the early 2010s, I think it was like 2012 or 2013, that they allowed new TLDs to be created, and a bunch of new TLDs were created. But since then, there haven't been any new TLDs created. So if you're getting emails about like .music and whatever, it's probably just because they're kind of stepping up their marketing efforts. But those TLDs have existed for a while.
Yeah, it also seemed like sort of trend that people just want to have funky names, which is quite bullish probably on the Handshake, because you can have very funky names. But there is project, probably most popular, and I'm not a huge fan of this project actually, because I don't see much of the differences between this project and ICANN. And it's, for example, Unstoppable Domains. They claim they are like, hey, this is blockchain domains. You cannot censor that and stuff. So it's already like someone already said, hey, this thing is already worked. Look at Unstoppable Domains. So what's the difference? We already have it, right? Or maybe your opinion is different.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when you look at naming protocols like Unstoppable Domains and ENS, and I think there's also another one on Solana. The name of it is I'm
I
missing it,
don't know
but
what's on Solana, but there's few protocols. Yeah.
yeah, there are a few naming protocols, and they're really focused on these like blockchain second level names. One is a number of them. They're not focused on DNS itself. So for example, on ENS, you can't actually set domain name system records. So you need to set A records and C name records, and there are all these different, very technical records to set. And that's not something that you can do on ENS. And the reason why is because they're focused on wallet naming. They're really focused on wallet naming, and you can pin like an IPFS site to it, but it's not focused on DNS. With
Is the
Unstoppable,
same with Unstoppable Domains?
so with Unstoppable Domains, I would need to double check that. But for them, most of these naming systems are primarily focused around wallet naming rather than DNS. And then when you actually want to solve the issue of DNS, you can't actually have a fully decentralized domain name system unless you decentralize the root, which is what Handshake does. So all of these other naming systems are doing second level domain names, but the root itself is still managed through ICANN. So it's still through this centralized system. And this is actually not just like a philosophical, like, oh, okay, like the root is decentralized. If the root is centralized, then the second level can't be decentralized. It's not actually about that as much as basically if you look at how DNS software is actually built, like the software in your computer that allows you to resolve google.com, or on your phone, or on any internet connected device. The way it's written basically only allows for a decentralized naming system if the root of it is decentralized. Otherwise, it's not going to be compatible with all this existing software that you need to be compatible with. So if you want to build a decentralized DNS, you actually need to start at the root and have that be decentralized. You can't just have a second level name and say, okay, here's a NFT that represents a second level name, and it's going to be like a decentralized system. It doesn't work that way technically. And if you look at how some of the like integrations and software works around it, like you can build a centralized resolver around anything. So they have like a Chrome extension, and I think they have like a integration with Brave, but all of those go through centralized gateway providers effectively. And you can't actually have a decentralized DNS without decentralizing the root.
There was someone asking, not so sure if you saw the question. This is the question being asked. If you could answer.
That's a great question.
I will read. Wouldn't we need big corporation to adopt the system that are in profit? It seems this would limit the amount of people they reach. How do you convince the big players this, which is Handshake, is actually the better option than the current naming system?
Yeah. So, interestingly enough, there's already been adoption from big players. Actually, Namecheap.com, which is the number 2 registrar in the world, right behind GoDaddy, they already support buying Handshake domains on their website. If you look for markin.p, you can actually find that domain on Namecheap. It's actually a Handshake domain, and you can buy it on Namecheap. So they're already adopting it. And again, they have a huge reach. They help people register millions of domains every year. So that's already a big corporation that's adopting it. The reason why they would adopt it is, well, on Namecheap's end, it's one, there's an aspect of, okay, this decentralized naming system could have more use cases and be even bigger than the centralized DNS, which has a lot of issues. Transfers are very difficult. Ownership is very difficult to manage. Everything about it is very legacy and slow. And so there's that aspect of it. The other aspect of it is philosophically. So like for Namecheap, they very much believe in a free internet. They believe in censorship resistance. They believe in something that is independent from any governing authority. And there's actually a philosophical reason behind why they're actually adopting and supporting Handshake. So there's that. If you look at a company like Google, and we've spoken with people who are executives at Google running their Google Cloud business and their browser operations, and for them, it actually can potentially affect their bottom line. So something that Google is very aware of is there's a general trend for the internet in that the Web 2.0 systems are all getting more consolidated and more fragmented between the different countries. We already know about China, which has a great firewall, but Russia, they are actually building up their own separate internet system. Each different country is basically starting to regulate the internet more and more. And now what used to be a global application system is becoming fairly fragmented and regulated by individual jurisdictions. So that actually limits the reach of the internet. And so for a company like Google, what they see is, okay, this internet is becoming less open and less accessible over time. A decentralized internet is something that is potentially more accessible and more resistant to these changes. And so that would be the reason why Google would adopt it. Of course, we're really much in the early innings of that, but that kind of gives you an idea of why even big corporations might adopt something like Handshake.
This is the great answer, because I didn't think about this way. I actually would think that Google would try to stop it, but this makes sense. Especially now, I think the countries do become more nationalistic focused. Like they want their own things, and probably the only one open internet is Web3 in this matter, and the Google would like to be there. But you see, I see the next question, and I think I want to add, because you said the .p domain, right? I can get this in Namecheap, but I can't use it, right? I can't use domains that are on the Handshake protocol. And can you tell me why I can't use it in the, because someone asked about Google Chrome integration, but let's go further. Let's go Mozilla, even Brave. Why what it takes to be usable? And do you think that the it's going in the right direction, or we are struggling right now, or there is some troubles along the way? What's your take on this?
Yeah. So one aspect is definitely partner integrations into browsers like Brave and Chrome and Firefox, etc. But I would say the biggest one is actually there's just a lot of infrastructure and applications that need to get built out, and it's really just a slow grind to build out this infrastructure over time. So for Brave, for example, they're actually willing to integrate Handshake. Their CEO said that they will integrate Handshake if a community member submits a PR. And so this is something where the community is coming around to go and create a PR for it. There was actually one community member who was capable and willing to do this, and they're waiting on getting funding to actually go and write this integration and create it. So that's just an example of one step to adoption. But there's a lot of other infrastructure that needs to get created. There are certain types of applications that are really only possible on Handshake. But again, you need to, and they're only possible now in conjunction with other DWeb protocols like Siacoin, Skynet, Arweave, Akash, which is decentralized compute. You can actually build really interesting decentralized applications using these technologies like a decentralized Facebook or decentralized Twitter. But it's just a lot of software to write. It's a lot of things to do. And so that takes time. And I think the best analogy is if you think about the path of Ethereum, first you had the ICOs in 2017, and then all the way through 2018, 2019, there really wasn't much stuff you could do on Ethereum that was actually useful. I know a lot of crypto investors from that time, and there were a lot of people who were deploying millions or tens of millions into crypto, and none of them had ever used a crypto application themselves. They had only ever just like bought in the tokens and traded them, and so it was very speculative until around 2019 when we had Compound and Uniswap all come together, and then we had DeFi Summer, and then now we have NFTs, and now we're getting more and more usage, and then these decentralized applications are actually getting used by people, individuals, and they're actually providing utility. So this is the same progression that Handshake is going to have, which is right now it's harder to use. You have to go through gateways, HNS.to. There aren't as many applications available. We've built a few, but there are still more that need to get built out. And it's really just a slow grind to kind of building out this ecosystem until we have enough of a flywheel that it actually really takes off.
Yeah, I remember in 2017 I was buying and trading crypto, but I didn't know you can actually build the apps on that. Like, so when someone would ask me where you started buying crypto, 2017, heard of Bitcoin 2013, but I never knew you can. And I think that 2020 was the first year that I realized, hey, there is DeFi, and there is like whole the I would say second layer to the life that we have, that
Yeah.
you can build. But wasn't with the Brave something? So the Brave want funding, right? I heard the gossip. I don't know if you want to speak on that. Like the 3 millions, they said they will integrate with for the price of 3 millions. Is it the truth, or like the Brave actually want to help, but or it's some different matter? I'm not sure.
Yeah. So actually, Brave at first was willing to do a paid partnership. Basically the way that like Unstoppable domains would get into browsers, like they pay to do some sort of partnership. And that was the same route that Brave was offering to the Handshake community. But then I think it was on one thread where a Handshake community was, didn't want to do a paid partnership or was upset about it, and they started a dialogue with Brave on Twitter. And then it was during that discourse that the founder Brendan was actually like, "All right, if the community submits a PR, then we'll integrate it." Because like they set their stance as if we're going to do the work. So initially Brave was going to hire the developers to go and write the integration and create do the user testing and all of that to actually go and get it into the browser. But after that discussion, they offered, if the community will step up and actually write the integration, then Brave will review it and merge it because it's all open source. Brave would do that for free, actually. So it was actually a very, very good outcome. And I, big respect to Brave for being willing to do that because, they have over 30 million users. They have a huge reach. And for them to be willing to integrate, this like niche naming protocol, pro bono, if they submit a PR, that's pretty huge. So yeah, really, really grateful for them being willing to do that.
That's some nice progress because the last time I heard it wasn't so easy. Do you see what browser do you use, by the way?
Yeah, I switch between Brave and Chrome usually. Yeah,
Do
and then
do
on
you
my phone,
see?
I actually have a Puma browser. It's a crypto browser that actually supports Handshake, so you can resolve Handshake domains on it.
Yeah, I downloaded. I haven't tested yet. I need to test. So to Chrome, I like using Chrome. So do you think the Google would do it, or rather they will do it when the things like you mentioned happen? The countries will be building the, let's say, centralized internet space around themselves, and Google will be like, hey, we need to go further. Do you see it happening there, or maybe before that?
Yeah, I would think of Google as a more of like a late adopter. It's pretty similar to how banks were saying they would never support Bitcoin and that Bitcoin would die, for like 10 years. And then 2020 happened, and then all of a sudden, all the banks that were previously ridiculing Bitcoin are now, rushing to support it. So with Bitcoin, if you look at it, it's really around, when 2020 happened, one was Bitcoin's price appreciation. But even outside of that, you also see all this money printing and inflation. And that really starts getting people aware of the issue and being like, hey, you know what? Actually, Bitcoin is a good store of value. We can put money into it and it'll preserve our buying power more than holding onto dollars that will, lose half their value within a few years just by us holding it. So you really need these systemic events to really show people the true value of these decentralized systems. Otherwise, a lot of these decentralized systems, you don't really need them over centralized systems. They only are really necessary when you have a failure in the centralized system. So the same thing with Handshake exists, where it's only when there are big systemic shocks to the centralized DNS that people become more aware of the issue and they seek alternatives. Until then, it's mainly going to be early adopters that support it. So, like Namecheap, for example, they're more of an early adopter because they believe in the vision, they see the value, and they're willing to invest now. But for someone like Google, they probably don't really care about the vision. It's really like, will it affect their bottom line? And for them to see that, they really need to see the systemic shocks, and then they'll get more excited.
So Austin also asked again if it's possible for the countries to pass the legislation that would ban adoption or integration. So let's say, give example of Russia, they will have their own browser, let's say, or China, they have their own browser, and they will be like, oh, you can't integrate this thing. You think it's possible, or rather that is like you can't stop this thing?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely possible for them to issue a ban to Google, but ultimately it's very, very difficult to actually censor the access to Handshake. It's similar to Bitcoin. It's very, very difficult to actually censor Bitcoin. They can shut down the centralized on-ramps in China, right? But people always find a way, they get around it. As long as they can access the decentralized network, if the core is decentralized, it doesn't matter if the centralized gateways get blocked because it's kind of like a game of whack-a-mole. So similarly for Handshake, okay, maybe let's say Google integrates it and is getting a lot of usage, and then suddenly, China or some other government says, hey, you can't actually support it. You need to block that integration. Well, then users can just download another client or a Chrome extension or something else, and there would be a million Chrome extensions that pop up to go and support Handshake. And unless Google blocks all of them, or they will try to block all of them. But again, it's just like a game of whack-a-mole. It becomes a fairly impossible task to actually fully block access. It's just not something that is really feasible given the technology.
I know you were looking for a few people a few new people that haven't got into Namebase yet. Have you got the people yesterday? You were looking for 5 people. Or not sure if
I
you're aware of that.
yeah, I think we might have the people, but I'll need to double check. If there's anyone else that hasn't signed
Yeah,
up
that's
and wants to kind of give things a try, I would love to talk to them.
so. Paul, you can message Namebase on Twitter, or anyone. Just open account on Namebase and message the Namebase on Twitter. It at Namebase HQ, and let them know. So if they still look for people, you will get 100 HNS, and so you don't have to invest anything, and you can use this 100 HNS to play with it and see what it is. I wanted to ask, because there is like I don't I'm not technical at all. There's also the Tor browser.
Mhm.
So the Tor browser has really complicated naming, these long onion addresses, and I wonder, there is reason for that, why they are like this, because it's you could help me with that. Is it make it difficult to track the source? Or so the question is, could handshake naming actually work with the Tor and does it have all of these functions that onion naming has? Is I don't know if it may, because I know that there is uh huge airdrop also for Tor browser if they would ever decide to claim their name, and we
Mhm.
can talk about the airdrops as well, but I wonder about Tor browser.
Yeah, Tor browser is actually, in my opinion, one of the best use cases for handshake names. You're exactly right. The onion URLs are difficult to read and difficult to remember. And there's a technical reason for why. Basically, the onion URLs are like hashing the actual like address of the server. So if the address of the server changes and the onion URL changes, it's fairly technical, but there's a reason for why they have to be those long ugly strings like you're mentioning. And this is actually a great use case for handshake because you can pin a Tor onion URL to your handshake name on the blockchain, and then Tor could actually support the handshake light client, right? Because it's a very small piece of software. They can embed that into Tor, and then now you can actually have this very censorship resistant and anonymous browsing experience while being able to access human readable names. And I know that that's actually a very big impediment to Tor usage, is that it's confusing and scary to people to enter in these URLs. It's also easy to get scammed when you don't know what the actual location of the website you're trying to visit is. So that's a great use case for Handshake, actually.
Yeah, I think the Tor slowly is getting better now. Like I feel they are, the search engine. There's like make it basically it will look like the regular web in
Mhm.
Chrome when we search. But I was thinking of Tor because we talk about all of these other clients, but actually I do believe actually if the handshake would be integrated in the Tor, it's simple naming, and I think it would actually incentivize people to use the Tor browser. I know the Tor browser is like really people think, oh, it's bad things on the Tor browser, but if that would be like clean with simple addresses, I'd be happy to use. So
Mhm.
was there any effort trying to connect with the company that does Tor browser? Any contact? Because also trying to let them know, hey, there is big airdrop for you. Like,
Yeah, I can't speak for other members in the community. I can say on our end, we did talk with them briefly and initially, and I think there was some interest. One of the challenges is there's just a lot of infrastructure to build out. So in terms of prioritization, it's always been fairly tricky. I actually think now is a good time to revisit working on a Tor integration, and it might be something where usually when you talk to these companies, like they have their own roadmaps built out already. They are very overwhelmed with whatever they're already working on. So it's very hard for them to actually change direction or, add new items to their agenda. So this is something where, it's up to the community, potentially even us, to actually go and step up and, work on an integration. But these things always take time, and especially when it comes to something like Tor, where the privacy and security is very, very important to get right. So it's actually a lot more involved because you need to kind of think through all the attack vectors and threat models. So in order for you to actually go and do the integration, it's basically just like a lot of work and it takes time. So it's something it's a great idea. It's something that should be worked on. It's going to take some time to actually get it out.
So the Tor knows about Handshake. So like
Mm-hmm.
they were of that. There is some complaint about your page.
Yeah. So this is USC integration. Basically, we have we built everything in house. At the time, there wasn't really a easy on ramp for us to use, so we built it in house so that people could get onto Handshake easily. Basically, the way that fund transfers work is it does take 2 to 3 days to settle. This is just when you work with fiat, you have these kinds of issues. On other platforms, so like on bigger ones like Coinbase or Robinhood, these huge companies have a lot of resources to invest in their money transfer solution. So what they do is when you deposit funds into them, your funds aren't actually hitting their accounts for 2 to 3 days. But what they'll do is they'll give you credit internally within their system and say, hey, your funds are on the way. We're just going to take a leap of faith and give you the money right now so that you can start using it. They have some other fraud controls and risk controls and whatnot. But basically, they implemented all of these systems so that you can actually make a fund transfer and have it hit your account immediately and have a really quick experience. That's something that we would like to do. It's going to take time to do it. It's fairly involved, and we're much smaller. Coinbase has like a few thousand employees. We have 9, so it just takes time.
It's cool to learn about other exchanges from you. One thing I noticed when we in the subject of exchanges, I know one exchange seems to be very well aware of the Handshake, and this is Kraken, because Kraken had article on Handshake. I've seen employees of Kraken tweeting about Handshake, because many complaints is that Handshake is for people who want to get tokens for whatever reasons, because this is not advice any sort. It's difficult. It's not on many exchanges, but probably because there is no CEO. So do you think these big exchanges are aware of that and they're gonna do it just like Kraken?
I think that Kraken will do it. I think this is one of those things where one of the actual challenges of Handshake is partly because there's no central foundation that has a exchange budget to pay the exchanges to do the integration. That's definitely one aspect of it. But another aspect of it is we've spoken with exchanges, big exchanges in Asia or Korea or even the US, where they have an interest, but Handshake is on its own blockchain, right? It's not an ERC20 token, and that actually makes it much more difficult for them to go and integrate. An ERC20 token, most of these exchanges just have, it's just you click a button and then you have a new token that can get listed instantly. There's no work involved. But for Handshake, it has its own full nodes, it has its own software, and you actually need to build, infrastructure to be able to support it. So that's one of the limiting factors for why these big exchanges haven't integrated Handshake. That's just something that takes time for them. And we know of exchanges that have explicitly said they will list or they're interested in listing. And it's just a matter of prioritizing along their timeline and when they get the free developer resources to go and do the integration.
I saw there was some discussion on Twitter because when it comes to the decentralized exchanges, especially on Cosmos, I think, which is multi-chain, there was some. I saw even some tweets that the Handshake would be integrated. Is it true? Is something considered? Something being worked on? Whenever the Gravity DEX finally will be place where you can exchange tokens? Do you think the community was interested in integrating or making bridge, basically?
Yeah, I'm actually not familiar with that effort. I know that there are a few members in the Handshake community and the Cosmos community that are aware of Handshake and support it. So I would not be surprised if that's something that's being worked on. But it's a fairly large community, and a bunch of different people are actually working on different things. So I'm not familiar with that myself.
Hmm. Um, so we gave a lot of talk to Handshake, but you are CEO of Namebase, right? So um, I must say, I like Namebase, um, and I spoke to your graphic designer, the web
Mhm.
designer,
Oh, Liz.
and I think she did amazing job. Like,
Mhm.
it's clean, it's simple to use, and I love the way it looks. It's not like the other crypto pages full of colors, chaos, but it's very simple to use. So it's great. But what role the name base wants to have? Because I saw you right now, because there was NFT trend, you try to advertise names as the, hey, it's also NFT, right?
Mhm.
Because I understand this is the company, and whenever people trade buy names, you make money. So your business is, the more people buy and trade, is the more money for your company. But so that's one, like, why this NFT approach, but also what Namebase role would be as the company that is centralized.
Mhm.
You know, yeah, if you could talk on
Yeah,
that.
definitely. I would say our role is basically equivalent to our role in Handshake is equivalent to Coinbase's role in Bitcoin, right? And these are all centralized companies because if you think about Coinbase, their whole goal is to get people to move from centralized systems, which they normally live in, to the decentralized system. And in order to actually have that bridge, you need some sort of centralized on ramp. And for us, it's a similar position. Our goal is to get as many people into Handshake as possible. Our belief is that the more people we get to own Handshake names, the more resources will flow into the ecosystem, the more interest there will be, the more developer attention, and that will just lift the entire ecosystem up. That will get more partners to integrate Handshake. That'll get more developers to create applications for Handshake, and of course, more users to use Handshake. So that's what we try to do through everything. So that's why we built out this USC on ramp. That's why we have this centralized platform, because that's the easiest way that you can actually go and use and get access to Handshake. And then from there, once people have the Handshake name, they can transfer the name out. They can use it within Namebase. They can do whatever they want with it. But our purpose is really just to try to grow Handshake as much as possible. And so that's why we will make these decisions, like building a centralized tool on top of a decentralized network, and also promoting Handshake names as NFTs, because that's something that's also very popular and people don't realize. And our bet is that if people realize Handshake names are also NFTs and they're excited about NFTs, then they'll get more excited about Handshake names, which will bring in more users, more interest, more money.
Do you have any cool names?
I don't personally bid on a lot of names. I try not to, just because of my position. But I do own Tieshun, which is my favorite name. I use it for my profile. It's on my Twitter. I'm Tieshun slash on Twitter. If you see anyone on Twitter with their name slash, that's a Handshake user.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my favorite one.
um you know, um I had something on the what's about marketing. Do you think how to work on that, like, because it's probably difficult part, but you know.
Yeah, I think marketing is one of the challenging aspects of Namebase is that one is Namebase is not Handshake, right? So we're a player within Handshake, and we play an important role, but we're separate from Handshake. And a lot of people know about Namebase or Handshake through Namebase, and they kind of associate them as one and the same. So when we do marketing, it's actually very difficult because we have to explain what Handshake is and get people to understand that. And then we have to explain what Namebase is. And these are two separate concepts. And we have to kind of get that across. And, most people don't give any, if you do like a PR piece or anything else, right? Like most people don't really pay that much attention. A long form interview like this is actually a better way of educating people. But it's one of the tricky aspects. And we historically haven't really done too much marketing. We're trying to lean into that more. We're exploring trying to work with a PR agency and doing some pieces about Handshake and sharing the news, like Namecheap, right? Number 2 domain registrar in the world. Them adopting Handshake is like a huge positive signal, and that's something that hasn't been priced in by the market yet, because most people don't even know about that. So we're trying to do some more promotion, but it's pretty difficult, and it's something that we're still learning on how to do effectively.
Are my funds, my HNS tokens, and the domain name safe on the Namebase? Are my Handshake domains and tokens are safe there?
Yeah, so we take a lot of, I would say anyone who ever says something's 100% safe, you should probably run away from them because they're lying. That's impossible. But we take as much precautions as we can in order to guarantee the safety of funds. Again, my co-founder, Anthony, that's what he studied at MIT. It was computer science and cybersecurity. We have a page actually in our learning center about the security practices at Namebase. And that's not just the architecture of how we secure the funds, but also one huge aspect of security is actually the operational security. That's something, like when Twitter got hacked and a lot of Donald Trump and everyone else was posting the Bitcoin addresses and there's a huge scam. That actually didn't have much to do with Twitter's technical security. It was actually their operational security. It was the customer support agent that had access to these huge admin actions, and they were able to get I forget the exact story, but they were able to get human engineered into giving up access to these accounts. And so something that we do at Namebase, for example, just like one small practice is no one is ever allowed to leave their computer open unattended,
Wow.
because if you leave it open, someone can go in and hack and do some damage. And we even have as a way to train that, we have a game where if someone has their computer open and you see them, you can go and go into their Slack and you can enter a command and it'll make them lose a point, right? So this is just like one of those small little games that trains the entire team to have better OPSEC. You also want OPSEC around anti-phishing and not clicking certain links. All these things are really important because these human factors are usually how a lot of these like very secure systems get hacked. So we take security very seriously.
So you owe the domain Tieshun, right? Tieshun. Sorry, like
Tieshun, yeah, that was good.
Tieshun. So and let's say it got adopted. It's in the browsers. It's integrated, and people rent it from you and use and rent and create the subdomains, and then you lose the keys to the domain. What happens then?
So
Because I want to say this is advantage of the centralized companies against. So I wonder what's then, because Handshake is decentralized, right?
Yeah. So one is that wouldn't happen because I keep Tieshun within Namebase, and I'm not withdrawing it anytime soon, so it's safe there. And I have my password and 2-factor, so if there's ever any issue, I'll always be able to recover it. But this is a good general question, which is, okay, if you have this TLD and then the owner sells subdomains and then the owner loses track of the keys or something like that and loses access to it, what then? Well, if that happens, then it's similar to if you lose the keys to your Bitcoin. You're kind of out of luck and you've lost it. And not only would you lose it, but all the second level domain holders would lose it. So it's a big issue. That's one of the challenges of the decentralized systems is they come with the security and the censorship resistance and all that, but also it means that people need to be more secure with their assets. With that said, there are ways to minimize the likelihood of that happening. You can actually set up your Handshake name so that it can only ever be renewed. So for example, you can lock it so that no one else can access it and make it possible for anyone to renew it so that you actually don't ever need to renew it yourself, or anyone can step up and renew a name so that it doesn't get lost. So there are some things that you can do that actually will make sure that your name is more secure if you're hosting it yourself. You can also do multi-sigs, but basically it's like Bitcoin. If you lose the keys, you're kind of out of luck.
Mm-hmm. Could Namebase help with that? Like, because I personally like to use centralized companies, because I I have pretty good passwords everywhere. I have like authenticator, but I just feel this extra level of security with the centralized company. So can Namebase play the role in this? Like, hey, you lose something, you're safe with us. We have it.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is that one is because we are a centralized company, we can provide the experience so that and the security so that if you ever lose the password to your account, right, you can reset your password. And if you have a two-factor device and you lose your device, then we can go through separate verification to make sure that you're who you say you are, and then we can help you reset your account so that you can still gain access to it. So that's one of the advantages of Namebase. And that user experience is something that we consider very important because even though it's more centralized and it's not decentralized, when you think about the typical internet user or even the typical internet power user, most of these people don't want to go through have like a hardware wallet and have their keys on a hardware wallet, and they store it in a copy in their backpack and store a copy at their bank, and all these security practices. That's just way too much for people to do because they have lives. They don't want to be spending all their time focusing on security and worrying about this. So that's definitely a role that we play, is making it easier to use and more secure and more safe for recovery. I think there's probably more that we could do there in the future, but I would say that is definitely something that we play a role in.
Um, yeah, this is good what you said, because to me the blockchain is still very difficult to use. So, for example, when it comes to DeFi, my belief is that for most of the people, DeFi is inaccessible. Uh,
Mhm.
I participate in DeFi, maybe you too, because for me it's easy. But for, I believe, majority of the people still doesn't know what is blockchain even.
Mhm.
Um, so I do believe that DeFi could play the role via centralized company. I often give example of PayPal, because why not? Like, PayPal could offer, hey, earn the yield on your Bitcoin or whatever, right?
Mhm.
So for me, it's important for it to be simple. Do you
Mhm.
think it's possible with the Handshake and maybe with your company to make in the future the experience of buying and renting domains easier than it is now? So, for example, do you think that Namebase will be the place where, because you say Namecheap is the place to rent domain, but maybe Namebase also plan to do it, that people
Mhm.
will go to Namebase and it will be one stop for the your name on the internet, right?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I would say that's definitely the goal, and you're exactly right. So when you look at DeFi, what's happening today is um, one is a lot of the volume today is outside of the exchanges, right? People withdraw to their MetaMask wallet and then they go and use Uniswap or Compound or Aave. But what you're seeing is a lot of these exchanges are stepping up in order to offer DeFi to their customers. And what I would expect is that actually the majority of the volume in DeFi in a year or two will be coming through these centralized exchanges. Again, what matters is you have a decentralized core, and then the outer layer can be through centralized exchanges. And that is just the trend, and that's a stable state for the ecosystem. So that's definitely going to happen in DeFi. And when you think about Namebase and naming, that's a similar goal here as well. It's how can we get Handshake to 1 million users? Well, we can make the experience really easy, and we can provide tools on top of these decentralized systems so that they're very accessible to the average consumer. And that's what we're working on.
What about, I wonder, does Namebase had some funding from VC firms? If yes, can you disclose the how much money you were able to raise? If you are, don't know if you can disclose that, if you are profitable at this moment, and maybe because I think you are sponsored by Peter Field. Does these people give some support and insight on how to develop the company? You know.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question. So we raised from, and it's on our about page actually that you can see. We raised from Paradigm, which is a well-known crypto fund, Balaji, Thrive Capital, Pump, who's another well-known character. So we raised from a number of investors like that, and we raised $5 million in total. We are not profitable yet. Most of the stuff that we build is really future oriented. The goal is, okay, if we can get Handshake to be this much bigger, then we can potentially be more profitable. But right now, not profitable. Everything that we build is really in the service of growing the ecosystem. So that's kind of how we operate.
What? Sorry, I lost I lost the thought
Okay.
For a moment. Is there anything you want people to know about Handshake or Namebase, that something no one ever asked you, but you really like, you always struggle, you're not being asked this question, and you think it's very important to answer?
Yeah, I think something that not so much what has someone not asked, but a question that should get asked more is, okay, how does Handshake actually get adoption and take over the world, right? Like that's really the big question, because if you're getting involved, you want to understand the path forward and see how it could get big. And this is something that is almost impossible to predict exactly, but you can kind of get a rough sense of it. And really, the way it works is it's very similar to, if you look at how Bitcoin or Ethereum or some of these other protocols have gained prominence. You have an initial period where there is more speculation than utility, right? So like Bitcoin was a lot of speculation around the price. There was some utility around trading drugs on the dark net, but it was primarily the price action that brought people in. And then now, 10 years later, we're seeing, oh, wait, like all this monetary printing is bad. We don't want that. We want to have a store of value. Now, Bitcoin seems like a very useful asset to have. Ethereum, early on, ICOs, a lot of speculation. Now, 5-6 years in, oh, we have like DeFi and NFTs. This is potentially world changing. Now we have a lot more utility, and that's really interesting. Similarly, for Handshake, this initial period is a lot more speculative. It's more belief and vision driven. But what you end up seeing is, as the existing internet system and the DNS gets more and more centralized and more consolidated and more regulated, as these DeFi apps start to have more problems, which they will have with their domain name, as people become more aware of these issues, then you'll see a lot more interest towards a decentralized naming system like Handshake, and you'll see a lot more usage and growth. And so it's kind of a waiting game in some respects, but also in the meantime, the best way to kind of prepare for those systemic shocks that bring people into the system is to share Handshake as much as possible with people that to educate them. Because once people understand what Handshake is, they almost always get really excited about it, and they stay with it and they start using it. So I would say the path to adoption is sharing it with friends and people that and educating people about it, but then understanding that it'll actually play out over the long term, where once these systemic shocks happen, that's when you'll get the most adoption.
Yeah, this is often my argument, because once I find out about Handshake, it is just so fun, and I don't want to use too selective words. It's just cool. It's just so cool, that, well, this is like fun. We can buy names, we can trade, we can bid. So tell me, let's say it's year 2031. How do you see the internet then?
Yeah, I think what you're going to see is a decentralized route. My bet is on Handshake, but who knows? But you're going to see a decentralized route naming system of some form, because that's the only way that it can exist. And you'll see, your normal domain names, like going to a website, that'll go through the decentralized route. So all the browsers will support it and will be integrated in it. And then you'll also probably see, this is my personal bet, but I think you'll also see people using these decentralized names on Handshake as their usernames in decentralized applications like a decentralized Twitter, decentralized Facebook. These are all applications that have literally only just become possible to build within the last year. And so you're going to see those built out, and you're going to see some of them get adoption, and people will be using their Handshake names as the usernames. And I think that that's the world that we're going to live in 2031. And it's really just a matter of certain milestone events happening in order to really kick that off.
And will the Namebase be public company then?
That'd be ideal. We'll see what happens.
Because I remember Peter Thiel always said the company need to aim to be monopole. So are you aiming into this?
I am not aiming for that, but I am aiming for Namebase. When someone thinks, okay, what is the easiest, most convenient, the simplest, most powerful way to get access onto this decentralized internet? My goal is that they think of Namebase first. And that's not by becoming a monopoly, because it's actually the nice thing about these decentralized systems is that you can't really become a monopoly, right? Coinbase is huge. They're a $50 billion company, but they're not a monopoly. You can go through Gemini, you can go through anything else, but Coinbase has built the most user-friendly, well-known, convenient way to get access to Bitcoin. And they continually innovate and provide value to customers in order to maintain that position. So that's the hope for Namebase, is that we provide the best solution. And by providing the best solution, we are remembered and used by as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm. Look, I'm having some HNS tokens, right? I'm not looking for financial advice, but your intuition. And I also have domains a lot, also emojis. What do you think will play more? Not sure. What's better? What's better? Could you, for you personally, you think token itself, which will be, I don't know, provide security and also the value because in the future it will be used to trade, or the names itself?
Yeah, I think it's a trade-off between, are you going to be active or passive? If you're going to be passive in the ecosystem, holding onto the tokens is the easiest way to gain exposure to the growth. But if you're going to be active, then actually getting good names is going to be something that is probably going to be even bigger. If you just look at, and we make a lot of the metrics public, if you go to namebase.io/stats, if you look at the marketplace volume, that has been growing exponentially for the past 12 months. There's been so much more volume, and the average price of the names has been going up. You'll see on our homepage, we surface every day there are sales for 10x, 100x gains from these names. But if you look at the HNS price, HNS today is roughly, well, actually, as of today, it's I think it jumped 20% today as we're talking. So
I was surprised too.
Yeah, so that kind of maybe Namecheap is starting to get priced in, but that it's, if you look still roughly, it's only 2x what it was a year ago. Whereas these names can sell for 100x or more. And so it's just, all right, are you going to be active? Then maybe you should get involved in the names. If you're going to be passive and you just kind of have a general thesis and feeling about the decentralized web becoming more prominent, then holding tokens is the easiest thing you can do.
Yeah, I'm just being annoyed with these emails because it's not my names. So I think it will come. It's the time, I have some friends that we all use, and you need to be patient and don't give the names too low. The offers will come for people who look for specific name.
Yeah, I would just add, when you think about the traditional domain name, and you think about like Michael Saylor, right, very famous Bitcoin personality, he has made tens of millions of dollars selling domain names. He sold voice.com for $30 million. He registered that decades ago. With naming, the interesting thing is that even though you can have an infinite number of names, the actual names that people think about and are valuable is very, very scarce. And so the name of the game in the domaining world is you get a good name and you just hold on to it for forever, basically, because over the long term, you can expect that because of the scarcity, it'll become more valuable over time as the underlying system becomes more valuable. And so, Michael Saylor held that for like 10, 20 years and then made $30 million from it. For Handshake, it's going to be the same thing, because this lesson applies to any naming system. As the ecosystem becomes more valuable, the best thing you can do is really just hold on to it. And it's something that most domain investors hold on to their names for years, before selling them. So it's just something that takes time and compounds over the long run.
Yeah, he's good with the patience.
Yeah, yeah.
It seems like. I have some name that I think I'm just gonna hold it. It's basically whether it goes to zero because which would mean the handshake is not getting adopted, or the other is handshake is getting adopted. And is do you think emojis will play the role there?
That's something that is getting a lot of usage. There's a lot of like trading activity around emojis, and we're trying to surface that more as well. We're working on improving the product to make these trends more clear. But emojis are gaining steam now, and there's another system called Yacht that is pretty popular,
Hmm.
and they only do emojis. It's something that I don't know over the long term because I personally don't know like how they will be used. Maybe if they're used as identifiers, then they could be really really big. It's something that I think we'll have to see play out. But if you just look at the market right now and what the trend is, it seems like emojis will play an important role
Hmm.
just based on the trading activity around them.
Just quick question about the price. Wasn't the investor price 10 cents? Or
Yes, for the
yeah,
handshake coins.
yeah. So like it's oscillate in the low end, basically. Yeah. Um, what books you read? Can you share with me with us?
Yeah. Let's see. They're really all over the place, and it really depends on the specific problems at hand. So, if I'm facing a specific issue, then I'll try to look for a book involved in it. Um, let's see, a recent one that I read that I enjoyed was The Goal. It's a management book. It's a story about a kind of like a plant manager facing issues with their production. And it's actually like a fictional story, but it's a fictional story that teaches you how to actually focus on the variables that matter in order to optimize the output of the entire organization or the entire plant in this example. So that's a book that I read recently that I enjoyed that I think is relevant. Uh, but again, it really depends on the specific problem at hand.
And do you have the favorite book?
Favorite book? I would say no favorite book. I if a book is useful to me in a specific situation, then I
Hmm.
like it. I don't find any book is particularly life changing. It's really just a lot of small incremental improvements that add up over time.
Hmm. And how about the movies? Do you have the favorite movie or few?
Movies. No, I'm not. I'm not super big on movies, so I don't. I don't really have any favorite movies. I'm not someone who's like big on favorites. Usually, I like things that are quality. I like things that are impressive. And I like to kind of
Hmm.
collect them and
Hmm.
observe them. But if you were to ask me to pin down a favorite, I would say that I would have a hard time doing that.
Okay. I hope the last question because I keep. Sorry, I'm taking a lot, a lot
No,
of
totally
time.
fine. Always happy to chat.
But I will share the video. I will make sure that it will get to as many people. I was surprised to learn you actually in New York or on the East Coast because everything happened in the other side of the US. So it's quite unusual. Why would you choose this way?
Yeah, so I'm actually fairly bi-coastal. I usually go between, Boston, New York, and SF. I'm kind of always hopping between the three cities. We have some team members in New York. We have some team members in SF. Some in abroad as well. So it's like fairly all over the place.
Mhm. I think I'm empty with the questions. So, but I
You're
think there
very
will be more.
thorough. It was good.
I think there will be more. If I would think about this, because sometimes I think too much. So you saw me maybe I was like I lost the thought because sometimes when you speak something comes to me, but then if I wait too long, but I'm sure there will be more questions. I believe we'll finish it, and I will be like, oh, I meant to ask this. I meant to ask this, but I think you spoke on so many things that this will bring some value to the people, and I think it's a really great piece for people who want to learn about the handshake and Namebase.
Mhm.
And maybe the people will have more questions after watching this video. So I hope this is not the last meeting. I hope when there will be some questions that I will have or people will have, I can try to steal your time and get you once again.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, and enjoy your day. You still have plenty ahead today,
All right.
and don't work too hard.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Will do.
Thank you. Bye bye, and thank you everyone for coming.